All right, here we are today with another daily upload, and today we are taking a last meta look in at how to fight at Adventures in Cardboard. Hopefully this video, which I think will be part 1, and then a next video, which will be part 2, will be the last most effective tactic available videos that I do for AIC. I've covered stuff from bludgeons to shields to vanguards to bows, even like mages and other weird relic stuff. I've covered a lot of different meta stuff, and hopefully these 2 fighting guides I'm going to try to make will be pretty much the end of it. This one I want to be not literally mandated, but like very highly suggested viewing for any future teammates I ever have, because this will be a lot of like team coordination, micro fighting strategy guides that are very, 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 very important. And if your team can completely be on all the same page about all these different things, you can fight so much more effectively and just be so much better as a group and overcome what would otherwise be unsurmountable odds through a couple of just very, very unique, very powerful tactics that I'm going to share with you now. So that's what this is. Essentially, for me to put everything in context and lay some foundation, I'm going to describe just what fighting is in the context of this. Because fighting at AIC, and I guess you could call it in all of life really, shouldn't be thought of as just in combat. The point of fighting is to do something, to defeat your opponent, to pass through them, and to continue on to your next objective, to remove an obstacle to your success. The reason why you fight something is because you can't otherwise get around them. Like in life in general, the best path forward is not to fight, but at Adventures in Cardboard, you are drawn into a circumstance where you are forced to fight to complete your objectives, and so you do so to the best of your ability as quickly as possible. So, I mean, like, in a game of Capture the Flag, you wouldn't go after every single enemy detachment that exists because there would be no point to that. The point is to capture flags and to win. And so that's what you're supposed to do. And the better you are at fighting is the better you are at getting and keeping flags, because that's what that is. And that is in the context of the larger game. So in a duel, fighting means something different than when it means in a large game context. And specifically in a large game context, we're going to look at strategy, tactics, and logistics. So as far as tactics goes, I'm probably one of the best tactical fighters in the realm. I mean, I'm making this video and I'm trying to share what I know with other people, so I have to at least know something. I've been fighting for 10 years, and I win most battles I get into. I mean, I wear full armor and use a shield, so I'm playing the most overpowered class, but more than that, I think I have a pretty good understanding of how group dynamics work in your, like, the members of your team versus the members of your opponent's team, and how to get the members of your team to do all the right things with you and for you to help them out as much as possible so that you can fight the best, so that you can win, so that you can bypass your opponents and remove an obstacle to your success. Like, I think I know a lot about that. And I know a fair bit about large game strategy, about where you're supposed to be, where everyone else is going to be, like what you should do. Like, if you're standing around on the trail and you have 3 people with you and you're like somewhat near the enemy base, you should think to yourself, oh, we could probably go take a flag if we're quick and sneaky enough. And then if you go take a flag, you know, oh, I should go back to my base because that's how I'll win. That's some strategy right there. Really basic strategy, but strategy. Now, logistics is very, very hard. I swear no one is actually good at it. No one's actually any good at logistics or macro fighting. Everyone always just gets lucky with it. The strategy and tactics I would consider to be micro. They're things that you can think of just by like viewing your surroundings and understanding what you're seeing. And the better you understand, the better you are at micro. But macro, you need to know things that aren't in your surroundings. Like, that's some really complicated stuff. So one example of macro logistics is, instead of just seeing where you are and understanding what you should do, you need to think where you could be and what you could do if you were there. So it's a very, very high level type macro strategy, essentially. It's macro versus micro. One of my favorite quotes by Omaha and Bradley, I believe he's an American general: amateurs talk strategy, professionals talk logistics. So I am an amateur. I talk strategy, but I want to get into the realm of logistics, and I plan on making a video about it, but I'm not sure how that's going to go or how long it'll take, because I myself am bad at logistics because it's really, really hard. Everyone who pretty much wins at AIC, like, wins large weeks where it's not just they had better forces and so they just out microed them. No, it's like they actually like spent some time and energy thinking about macro. They didn't do that. They just got lucky. Like, there's I don't think there's a single person who I could point to through 10 years of history who I've looked at who was actually good at logistics. The only time I've ever seen that demonstrated, like, really cognizantly, okay, maybe the two times I can think of were the first 2 or 3 days of hard tactical. I put a lot of sweat and thought into that. And there was one other instance, the 100-man Zerg, which I'll make a video around later, where I planned out what we were going to do, where we were going to be, and how long it was going to take us. And we macroed the heck out of that game and did some crazy stuff. But we didn't plan far enough into the future, and then we eventually got rushed by every single other team in the game because we took all of the flags but one on the field. That's a story for a different day. That was perhaps the only time I've been good at macro. For the other 8 or 9 years, I've sucked at it, and I still suck at it. So we might take a look into that later, but today we're doing micro. So this is that. Essentially, there are 3.5 really, really big things for getting good at tactical fighting. Good, like, big concepts you need to understand. And the primary one, like, if you come away with nothing else from this video, you need to understand the difference between a pusher and a tagger. Because there are two types of AIC fighters, pushers and taggers. And I'll get into that in a bit. That's a huge thing. Selective targeting. So this is, no matter the group size, no matter what, if it's more than a one-on-one, you need to understand this. Like, even if it's a 2-on-1, this is important. You should understand it. These are more for like 3+ players. Selective targeting and formation fighting and positioning are all much more large. I would almost call them strategies instead of tactics, but they're definitely still micro. They're definitely still, you look around, you see what's around you, and you take on the best form to help with the situation you're currently in. Strategy, micro strategy. Here are 3 very, very rudimentary formations that I'll talk about in the next section. I'm just giving you kind of an overview of what the video is going to be about. The crossbow, the satellite, and the arrow. These two are inversions of one another. Same thing, just flip the other way. But essentially you have a wall of attackers out here that are all sort of attacking something, and they're very wide, so they're preventing flanks. And then you have whatever valuable team member you have back here. So if that's your archer, if that's someone carrying a flag, it's a crossbow. You're engaging an enemy force, but you have something to protect. Vice versa, the satellite, you have a very strong fighter out front. Ordinarily, that's me as a mover, who's kind of moving about, trying to break up the enemy line into clumps. And then you have these flanking wings that can jut in and attack if they need to. And then you have the arrow, where all your valuables are once again in the back, and they're kind of surrounded with rear guards. And you have a really long, skinny group, so they can fight their way through thin peninsulas and also move very quickly around the map. So transitioning between these sort of 3 very different formations can pretty much set you up. But I'll talk about why formations are a good thing in the next couple sections of this video. So yeah, that's what the video is essentially going to be about. And I guess the last thing before I launch into the actual explanations of stuff is one of the things that I've learned at AIC, that if you go long enough, you will also learn at AIC, is how unbelievably difficult it is for people to follow instructions. So I'm saying all these things and I'm telling everyone everything, but like, they probably just straight up won't listen. Like, that's just the way it is. You come to have a lot of respect for the military and how good everyone is at following instructions, because it can do some really crazy stuff. Like, it's pretty nuts when you go from what AIC combat is, which is essentially just mob rule. It's just a bunch of people with sticks fighting a bunch of other people with sticks, and just however more many people or however longer the sticks are on one side than the other wins. Like, it's pretty cut and dry. But if you are one of the lucky few who see a group of children at Adventures in Cardboard work together for as many as 5 minutes, you will discover how unbelievably successful it can be. Like, we had a skirmish a couple of years ago where my team did a shield wall and the other two teams literally just followed mob rule. And my team's shield wall survived with 2 losses, and we massacred the other two 30-person teams. So 28 of my 30 people survived, and 30 on one team died and 30 on the other team died. And the 2 losses we had were scouts who ran away from the shield wall. I repeat, our entire shield wall survived because we used a little bit of formation fighting and decimated. It was an incredibly successful thing, and it was one of the largest groups of children who have ever worked together at AIC in the history of the company. Like, it's a very rare occurrence, but some crazy things can happen when it does happen, and I'd love if it happened a little bit more often. So here are some simple things, well, simple ranging to not so simple things that I'd like to tell you about fighting at AIC. And we're going to start off with movers versus taggers, the basic fundamental AIC combat tenet, and the largest difference between fighters at Adventures in Cardboard.
Of fighting at Adventures in Cardboard is the difference between pushers or movers and taggers. So it's very, very important that if nothing else you understand this so that you're able to actually help your team when you're in an encounter. Because there's a very, very big difference between people like me, even though both of us are in full armor. The style of armor, the style of weapons, and especially the style of fighting differ so greatly between the two of us here. So me, with a shield and sword, I'm pretty slow, but I'm also extremely hard to kill. Even if people like throw fireballs, even if people like run at me with daggers, I can pretty much effectively defend or block almost anything that comes my way. But I'm also really slow, so I have a very hard time actually running after people and getting kills. And that's where the tagger comes in. Alright, so essentially as my pusher friend over there, as they introduced me, I am a tagger in this role with this armor. I have pretty good mobility. I can definitely run around as much as I feel like I need to. And I got this huge, big, long vanguard, so I can really stab quite far out and actually get some like really good reach lunge kills on people on the enemy team in the enemy line. The big difference between me and my friend over there is that I'm able to extend really far, but because of my extension, I sacrifice both protection, I mean I got like gaps there, I sacrifice protection, and I don't have a shield. So if a mage comes up and I'm not able to deflect with my sword, I'll just get like hit with one fireball and die instantly. Or if someone rushes me with a dagger, and they're able to block my sword with something in their other hand, like a shield, I'm just screwed. But I'm really, really good at lunging in, getting kills, and then getting back out to safety. But the opportunity for those kills has to be made for me by my mover. So the mover has to break through the line a little bit and give me the opportunity to run in and tag a couple people out. There are no taggers who can take the role of pushers. If a tagger is trying to take the role of a pusher, essentially what's going to happen is they're either going to just get walked over, like if there's one mover on the enemy team, they'll just like walk up to them, and the tagger won't be able to do anything if they can't actually like have an opportunity to get around them. Or if there aren't any like good movers on the enemy team, the tagger will just like get enough kills so that the enemy retreats, and then it's like there was a mover even though there wasn't one. The best way of fighting is with one or more movers, but a lot more taggers than movers, so that the movers can make an opportunity and then everybody else can capitalize on that opportunity. And also the taggers have to protect all the other kids that are around. So like the taggers, it's their job to provide deterrents for people trying to rush their archers or rush their other people with more specialized weaponry like bludgeons and stuff. So it's arguably the most important role, but really I think movers are perhaps the most important role, just because taggers have a really rough time if there's not at least one good mover.
All right, moving on, we're going to look into selective targeting. It is a bit more complex, but it is perhaps the single best fighting strategy. So if movers versus pushers was a tactic, this is a genuine strategy. This is what you should do given the situations you are in. And if this strategy is used well by all of your team members, you can pretty much like move around the field and do whatever you want, because it's really, really, really strong if your opponents aren't doing the third thing on this list. But first, we got to get into selective targeting. So here's that.
Alright, so the next part about micro fighting at Adventures in Cardboard that you need to know, after you've learned about movers and taggers, now you need to know what selective targeting is. Selective targeting is, again, like pretty much in descending order, the second most effective fighting strategy at AIC. And it is literally just picking which opponents need to die in what order. And it's a very, very simple communication between you. Hey, target this guy first. Hey, go after that guy first. So, as you can see, there are 4 of us here standing in a line. I am obviously the mover because I have the shield and all the armor, and I'm really big and beefy, and so I would stand out ahead of the rest of my team to try to like defend them, and so if need be I could strafe from side to side to try to protect one of them. But if you are on the opposing team and you see the 4 of us here, you should target the weakest one first so that we're lesser in numbers. Or if there's someone who's carrying like a flag or a special objective or something, target them first. And so the way of doing that is by communicating with your team, centralizing more of your fighters around that one person, and then less of your fighters around defending the rest of the force. So if I am a mover and it takes 2 or 3 people to hold me off, if you switch from 3 people holding me to just 2, so that one of your 2 people can run and go 2v1 on my archer over there, that's a really good usage of your time and space. Because in doing that, you will be able to reduce the size of our force while still holding me off, and eventually when our force is reduced to the point where we can't actually fight back, we're really just screwed. So, in order, the people who you should try to go after would be the archer over there, the bludgeon guy over here, my tagger next to me, and then if I'm left by myself, as a pusher, I'm really, really good at defending my teammates, but I'm pretty bad if I get surrounded. Well, I guess everyone's bad if they get surrounded, but circling behind a mover or a pusher with a dagger is pretty much the surefire way of getting them. But if they have their teammate to support them, and you try to go after the pusher first, it won't work, because then their teammates will take advantage of that and kill you guys, and then your whole force will crumble, and then we can just pounce on you. So that's essentially what the point of selective targeting is.
Now we are into formation fighting. Formation fighting is essentially the antidote / the defense against selective targeting. It is the opposite to it. So if the idea of selective targeting is targeting your opponent's most valuable yet weakest members, like this poor archer over here who looks a little bit sleep deprived, put your archer at the back so they can shoot over the line but be protected. Like, that's the whole idea of formation fighting. But I'll explain it in more words in this video, so there's that.
Alright, so I believe you just heard about selective targeting and the idea that if there are 2 parties that come up amongst each other, your party should look at the people in the other party and decide which one should be taken out first, and then move yourselves so that it's 2-on-1ing or 3-on-1ing the people that need to get taken out first, and then putting less people on everyone else so that you'll essentially knock them over like a thing of dominoes. Formation fighting is literally, by definition, the antidote to that. It's the opposite of that. It is your team, your members here, looking around at who you have, and organizing yourselves in such a way that when the opponents come to you, it's very hard for them to take out the people who should get taken out first. So, for example, the archer is perhaps the greatest damage dealing person on your team, if they're good at using their bow, that is, because they can just get 2 shots, get their arrows back, get another 2 shots, and reliably get long range kills. But because they dedicate both hands, they're also the weakest member of your team. And so you really actually need to protect them. And so, putting them either in the back or on one side, then with a tagger to protect them, is a good way of using formation fighting tactic to protect your people. I've invented, I think, 3.5 very simple formations that, in my opinion, do a pretty good job of protecting all your people. They're ones that can be very, very loosely set up on the field. They're not like actual strict formations. They're just sort of like archetypes for all of your team members to think about and organize themselves in, so that the people who need to be protected are, and the people who need to actually do damage and do work are doing what they're supposed to be doing. So, for example, one of the formations is satellite formation, where it's a ring of people and then a dot in the center. That dot is represented by your mover. The mover is supposed to be up at the front because they can't get tagged out quite as easily, and they're kind of pushing everyone back. They're making opportunities, they're jumping into the enemy line and forcing them to scatter. And then the people on either side of the wings of the bird, I guess you could call it also, need to arch their way inwards and capitalize on all those different opportunities that you have. And then all the people in the back or the middle of this satellite dish need to be all of the important people, like mages or archers or people with specialized weaponry like bludgeons that are shorter but better for dealing with other pushers. So your taggers really need to have a very, very active role, and a satellite formation does both the things of allowing your movers to capitalize, allowing your taggers to capitalize on the things done by your movers, and protecting the other people who you also need to be protected. That's the whole point of formation fighting.
And lastly, we have kit utilization. This is rather advanced, and it's really more like the person with the kit needs to know how to utilize their kit the best and then fit into everyone else. But everyone else needs to also understand how to like really get the best out of that kit. So the kit utilization isn't only the responsibility of the kit user, it's the responsibility of the team. But the kit user can't be incompetent because then you can't utilize it anyway. There are a bunch of different types of what I would describe as different kits, because they all fit into the team in different ways. I mean, the 2 biggest ones that fit in different ways are mages and archers, because they're both pretty weak on their own, but in a like large team setting, they're unbelievably potent. Shield users, bludgeon users, and relic weapon users are a little bit more traditional, but even they are pretty big divergences from like a scout class or a vanguard class. And so the team needs to fight differently around them. I mean, if you have 2 or 3 or 4 shield users and they form a shield wall at the front of your line, you're going to move much differently than if you only had a bunch of people with vanguards. It's just a different kit style, kit makeup in your army. And so using that kit is to its greatest effectiveness is very important. And that's what this next section is about. So there's that.
All right, so I think the last thing that I'm going to need to talk to you about is essentially kit utilization. And kit utilization is different from niches in a formation fight. So it's different than movers and taggers. That's a different thing. Movers and taggers are more about the dynamics of the battle. Kit utilization is about what you bring to the battle. Who you are determines whether you should be a mover or a pusher. Or, no, the same thing. A pusher or a tagger. So, I'm here with a bludgeon, and my comrade here is with a bow and arrow. With this bludgeon, I'm limited in both reach and, like, defensibility. Because I have to dedicate both my hands to this short weapon. But the weapon can pierce through people who are movers or pushers. So I can tag people with armor and get them out and advance my team, but it's also very easy for me to get tagged out because I'm bad against vanguards, I'm bad against people in armor, well, I'm good against people in armor, but not in 1v1s, because then they just rush me with their shield and I die. But if I can be utilized well as a tagger and sneak around or like duck in when there's space available for me that's being made by my pusher, if they can push forward, get the pusher on the opposing team to overextend themselves, I can rush in, tag them, and it'll be a huge win for my team. Because then the rest of the killers can all do, or the rest of the taggers can all just run in and completely wreak havoc on their formation. It's a really great way of disrupting a formation, and that's only possible because of this kit. Likewise, my archer friend over here has a different kit that he'll tell you about. Alright, so essentially what my bludgeoning friend over here just directed to me is about kit utilization, specifically about archer stuff. As I talked about in the bow thing, I don't know exactly how many people watched that, it was kind of long, but essentially the thing that's craziest about bows is how incredibly good they are against people without armor and terrible with armor. Because one person just raining arrows and the rest of the team is feeding arrows back to them can take out 2 people every minute reliably for however many minutes the archer is protected for. And as soon as they get exposed, they just get eliminated and killed so fast. But they're an incredibly potent, continual, safe, reliable damage dealer, so that even if you're in a standoff, your archer can launch arrows into the enemy brigade. Your mover will move forward, get those arrows, reclaim them, give them back to your archer, and just keep getting kills from a safe distance. It's an incredibly powerful kit, but because it is literally a 2-hand non-melee kit, you cannot defend yourself in any way if you get rushed. Like, you're screwed if you get attacked. When you have this bow out and you're like a good 15 feet away, you're golden. But as soon as they decide they don't like you anymore, you're pretty much screwed. So it's sort of like the pusher kit, or the bludgeon kit. If the bludgeon is being protected by their comrades, it's crazy. But as soon as the comrades like forget about them, they're just done immediately. Archer's that, but worse. It can be used really, really effectively, but if it's not used effectively, the formation doesn't support it, then you're all just screwed.
And that's it for me today. As always, Adventures in Cardboard. Today I'm promoting this wonderful, it looks like Plants vs. Zombies mug with Adventures in Cardboard. A bunch of zombies with funny hats and swords and shields and axes and stuff. You can find that on their website, adventuresincardboard.com. They also have an Instagram and a YouTube. You're on my YouTube, but I also have an Instagram that should be in the description. So yeah, thanks for stopping by. Glad you could come, and best of luck. I'll see you tomorrow for another daily upload.